This Friday, EDF, that is Électricité de France, the state-owned utility, announced that more than €130 million have been allocated to fund cooling systems and also renovation works in French schools and nurseries to help them prepare for future heat waves. Thousands of schools and nurseries have been forced to close this past week across the country with temperatures deemed unsafe. Most do not have air conditioning. Well, for more, we can bring in Caradee Wright, Chief Specialist Scientist at the South African Medical Research Council, leading the Climate and Health Research Programme. Thank you very much for speaking to us here on France 24 today. And it's fair to say that here in France, and of course beyond, we are suffering in these extreme temperatures. But what do extremely high temperatures mean specifically for children trying to learn in schools, in nurseries?
Yeah, thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to be with you today. Just unfortunate that we're talking about such a dangerous topic. So, children are highly vulnerable to heat because their bodies can heat 3 to 5 times faster than adults' bodies would. And this vulnerability is really driven by biological and behavioral factors, including an underdeveloped ability to sweat, a higher body surface to mass ratio, and then an inability to recognize when they actually need to cool down. Small children especially have no recollections of what would happen if something, they get very hot and they feel bad about it. They don't remember those things. So every time there is a new heat experience, we have to help them best protect themselves again.
And when we're talking about, the physical buildings, are there specific, say, architectural features of schools, nurseries that make them particularly good or rather bad at retaining heat?
Yes, that's entirely true. So the architecture of a classroom can make a huge difference to the health and well-being of a child in that space. To start with, you really do need a ceiling and insulation in that roof. And windows that are placed strategically across from each other to allow ventilation to move through those windows. Often it's difficult because the air outside is warm, in which case we want to try and make the air nearest to the classroom outside cooler by planting things like trees or having overhead awnings or filters near windows. The other thing that one can do is if there are windows and very large ones and the sun is shining directly through, is best to close the curtains and shade the direct sunlight from entering the classrooms. Fans are obviously helpful, but they can actually be less helpful at very high temperatures, that is. So fans may not necessarily always help. And of course, air conditioning is the ideal scenario, but when powered by renewable energy.
Now we've been showing on our screens pictures of French schools, nurseries. A lot of them are old, historic buildings. Many of them over 100 years old. Presumably, the sorts of things you were talking about weren't at the forefront of the architect's mind some 100 years ago. Are we talking about the need for a complete structural revision of what schools looks like, or do you think we can achieve meaningful change with things like air conditioning units?
It's a very good question. And this is really around adaptation and retrofit, or thinking about maybe rewiring how we do things altogether. So, certainly, if there's a need for new schools, we should ensure that they are heat resilient schools with respect to architecture, layout, as well as the design of the programs and how things are run within the school. I do think that there are opportunities for retrofitting older classrooms. There you can see an example of curtains across big windows to protect direct sunlight from coming in. There are also some very simple techniques that one can use that we use here in Africa. So it's to allow children to have water bottles at their desks in the classroom so that they can sip water regularly, not juice or other things, but water. A simple technique we also use is to have a small basin of water, and you can put your hands and even your feet into a small basin of water. I saw a paddling pond or something on the news this morning with children standing in it. And then lastly is a small cloth. It doesn't need to be a big cloth, a face cloth. You wet that in water, squeeze the water out and put it around the back of the neck. And then you just roll the cloth slightly every few minutes and you'll get to the cooler side of the cloth. And this can also really help keep a small child's temperature down.
Now, on Thursday here in France, French teaching unions called for a strike to protest what they described as unacceptable working conditions. Do you think it's right to treat these sorts of high temperatures as a workers' rights issue?
That sounds like a highly complex question. I'm sure that we do need to give thought to people who are working in classrooms. Under normal conditions, working with children can be difficult. So one can only but imagine in an environment that is very hot, where evidence that we have from around the world shows that heat can cause irritation and even aggression in some instances. So I do think it prudent to consider the health and well-being of not only the students themselves, but also the teachers and the staff at the school during heatwave events.
Now, France has historically been quite anti-air conditioning. Just 1 in 4 homes have a unit nationally. Do you think heat waves like this one, this very prolonged one that we're experiencing right now, are going to change opinions?
Again, that's an interesting thought. In Africa, it's similar. We don't necessarily have a stand on air conditioning, but we can't afford it in many of our places. So we are opting for better, or not better, but other types of solutions that we can afford. We are living in a warming world. That is without a doubt on the cards for the coming decades. And I think we've got to be real about the most practical solutions to save lives that at the same time don't harm our environment for both current and future generations. Whether or not air conditioning is the best solution, I don't know. It is a good solution at the moment when it's used with renewable energy sources. And if we are wanting to use it, I would suggest it should be for our most vulnerable population groups in instances such as cool rooms or cool spaces.
Now, these temperatures have affected students taking end-of-school exams as well. Do you think it's likely that we'll be seeing a wave of challenges to those exam results, given that the extreme heat very likely affected how the students felt when they were taking those exams?
It will be interesting to analyze those results. We have looked at something very similar here in South Africa. It wasn't around exam results, but it was around absenteeism, whether that absenteeism was from ill health due to heat, or it was because parents were concerned about sending children to school, especially children who have to walk to and from school in heat. We have seen associations between these relationships. It could very well be that learners or students are taking strain, both in the preparation for these exams, since temperatures are not dropping overnight. And that's really important for sleep. You know, sleep is a restorative mechanism, especially for learning and the type of stress one faces during an exam scenario. So without that cooling at night and the ability to really refresh for the next day, it could be that we will see some differences in the results of students who've written tests and exams during heatwave conditions.
Now, EDF here in France has just announced a massive fund, €130 million to cool schools and nurseries, with the aim being that all that money will be spent within the next 12 months. Is that realistic, do you think, that all it's going to take is 12 months and €130 million and this major issue will be more or less solved? Do you think that's realistic?
I think that might be overly optimistic because as much as we put in place mechanisms or infrastructure, there is a large degree of a requirement for behavioral change. That requires people understanding what the risks and consequences are and the actions that need to be taken to ensure that we protect health within an environment where we may not always be able to control the heat of the environment. A person will have to take individual action. A principal will have to consider whether or not scheduling exams in the afternoon makes sense if it's 40 degrees. Bring everything earlier in the day. Extramural activities. For example, a ban on no chase games, as I've heard here, has been implemented in some schools in London. A cousin of mine shared that with me. So I think investing the funds is a good thing, but I think it will need to be accompanied with raising awareness, providing information, skills, and upscaling of mechanisms that can make all that is included with that funding realistic in a space where people are actually meant to take up what they've been shown to take up.
Caradee Wright, Chief Specialist Scientist at the South African Medical Research Council, leading the Climate and Health Research Programme. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us on France 24 today.
Thank you.